pretty soon. So welcome everybody to the Yale-UPR information session on their joint MD PhD program. My name is Joana Guerrero Medina, and I'm the Executive Director of Ciencia Puerto Rico and also Director of the Yale Ciencia Initiative, which is a collaboration between Yale and Ciencia Puerto Rico. We're gonna be talking to you a little bit more about the MD PhD program at Yale and the University of Puerto Rico, and also about some of the features of both MDs at the University of Puerto Rico and PhDs at Yale. But before we begin, I just wanted to let all the attendees know, all the participants know, that you have a button called Q&A that should appear on your screen when you join. Feel free as we go through the presentation to use that Q&A feature to ask any question you might have that you would like any of the panelists to answer. So we're going to be checking that Q&A screen and answering all the questions that come through there. And then at the end of the presentation, we're going to probably have about 20-25 minutes for just open question and answers. And if anybody has a question at that time, we can answer it live. But in the meantime, please use that feature and feel free to use that feature. All right, so we're gonna get started. Today we have with us some of the leaders of the Yale-UPR MD PhD joint program with us. We have Dr. Tony Koleski, who's Director of Biological and Biomedical Sciences and Director of Graduate Studies at the Yale School of Medicine. We also have with him on the screen Dr. Daniel Colon Ramos, who's Associate Professor of Cell Biology and Neuroscience, and also Associate Professor of Neuroscience at Yale School of Medicine. Hi, Daniel and Tony. We also have Dr. Ricardo Gonzalez Mendez, who's Professor of Radiological Sciences at the University of Puerto Rico Medical Sciences Campus and the lead for this program with the UPR. Hi, Ricardo.
Hello, everybody.
And as I mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of Ciencia Puerto Rico, which is a nonprofit that promotes science education and careers, and also Director of the Yale Ciencia Initiative, where we run some of the collaborations that we have with Puerto Rico from the Yale School of Medicine. So briefly, today we're gonna give you a brief overview about the Yale-UPR MD PhD program. Daniel is gonna start off with a little bit of background about what this program is and how it started. Then Dr. Gonzalez is going to talk about the MD at the University of Puerto Rico and what are the what that program looks like and what are the specific requirements for the joint MD PhD program. Dr. Koleski is going to talk about the PhD component at Yale, and particularly what the Biological and Biomedical Sciences program is about. Then we're going to go through an overview of the application process and timeline, particularly with respect to the Yale portion of the application. And we're going to tell you a little bit more about what, once you're in the MD PhD program, what that looks like and how that runs. And finally, we're going to give you a little bit of an overview about the environment at Yale and the diversity of students and programs that that students will have at their disposal when they're here to complete their studies. And we're going to end with a Q&A session. So I'll pass it on to Dr. Colon Ramos, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the history of the joint program.
Okay, thank you, Giovanna. So I'm going to use the next 3 slides to give you a very brief primer on both the history and what the program entails. So this was a joint program that was established between the University of Puerto Rico and Yale in 2015. So it really launched on the academic year of 2015, 2016. It's a very young program. We have the first student coming this summer, and it's already been a very exciting collaboration. So we're looking forward to more applicants and more students joining. And it's one out of several efforts that Yale University has with initiatives in Puerto Rico. There are other efforts that include medical fellows, that include clinical research. So this is one out of several initiatives, and you'll see towards the end of the presentation other of the initiatives. And that's important to understand because there's a whole ecosystem of collaborations going on. Next slide, Giovanna. So briefly, the way that the program works, I'll talk about how you apply to it, but once you're in the program, the first 3 years are spent at the University of Puerto Rico doing medical courses and rotations. So the student will essentially be like any other medical student of the entering class, with the difference that the student will come to Yale during the first and third summers of those first 3 years. And during those summers, they'll have the opportunity of doing what are called laboratory rotations. And essentially what those are is that the students will select people that they want to work with as interns at the university. Will arrange everything. The trips here are paid for, the room and board is paid for, everything is covered. And the student has an opportunity of doing kind of like a prolonged interview, like an internship with several labs, like 2, maybe 3 labs. And that will allow the student during that period to select the lab in which they're going to be completing their PhD thesis at Yale later. So the student also, while here, will be will have the opportunity of participating in a number of activities of the MD PhD program at Yale, which is it's a separate program from this cooperative program, but the student will be able to integrate to that, including the MD PhD retreat. So there are a number of enriching activities that the person will be able to participate in. Then on year 4, after they have finished their boards at the University of Puerto Rico, they will be able to come here and complete their PhD. And that will be between years 4 to 7, 4 to 8. And then they'll go back to the University of Puerto Rico to finish their last year of the medical degree. Next slide. So when applying to the program, I think let me see, can we go back a couple of slides?
Yeah, that one, application.
Application, thank you. So when applying to the program, the students will simultaneously apply, I think here. The students will be able to simultaneously apply to the University of Puerto Rico and to Yale. So the way to think about this program is an integrated program, but it's a cooperative program, meaning that they need to be accepted both at the University of Puerto Rico Medical School and at the Yale Graduate School to be able to participate in this program. So the student needs to fill out 2 separate application forms. The deadlines for both are on December 1st, so December 1st, 2018 this year. And in order to participate in the program, the student needs to be admitted at both institutions, meaning they need to be admitted at the medical school program at the University of Puerto Rico and at the PhD program at Yale. Once they're admitted into both programs, it will be a joint cooperative program and all of the activities will be integrated, but the application process is modular. It's separate for the 2 different institutions. Next slide. So at this point, I'll let my colleague, Ricardo Gonzalez Mendez, speak about the University of Puerto Rico Medical School program.
Good afternoon. Very briefly discussing this, first thing is to always remember the University of Puerto Rico School of Medicine is a USA medical school and has been accredited for over 60 years. Our current accreditation extends through 2024, so it's a 10-year accreditation. Currently, all our students are legal residents of the USA. 98% are from Puerto Rico because we are a state university of the University of Puerto Rico State University System, and we're accredited by the Middle States Commission on Higher Education and licensed by the Puerto Rico Council on Higher Education. The med school is accredited by the Liaison Committee on Medical Education, and all our residency programs are accredited by the ACGME. We currently have 37 specialties and subspecialty programs that we offer after you graduate from the MD program. Next slide, please. Very important when it comes to admissions, there you have the links for our web pages at the UPR Med School. You must complete the AMCAS application, and there's also a supplementary application that you must obtain and fill out and send to our campus. Again, everything must be completed by December 1st. Some special requirements because of state law for the practice of medicine that we're required to comply at the UPR Med School. You must have 12 credit units of Spanish and 12 credit units of English. These are semester credit units. And that's a key different requisite for application that most medical schools have. You also must be either a legal resident of the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico or have strong ties, which are defined as being born in Puerto Rico, having attended high school in Puerto Rico, having attended college in Puerto Rico, or having your parents' legal residence in Puerto Rico. Usually, we require 3 out of 4 categories under very special circumstances and for very well-qualified candidates. We might consider 2, but that's very seldom done. Next slide, please. Important that all our instruction, all our books, printed materials, and tests are in English, same as the USA, but the teaching and lectures may be in Spanish. All the medical terminology is provided in English. Patient records at all our clinical sites are in English. That is part accreditation requirements, part a legal requirement. Some places have them in both languages, English and Spanish. You will be required to take the same subject examination exams from the National Board of Medical Examiners in English that you would take in the USA, and you must pass all of the US medical licensing examination, which are also given in English. These are a requirement of graduation. This is the reason why you will not have a research activity in your second summer that is devoted for you to take your USMLE Step 1, which is a key in order to move on to the 3rd year. And also it's very, very important you get a good grade if you want to do a top-notch residency program. We expect you to be fluent not only in English, but in Spanish, as the majority of our patients do not speak English. Next slide, please. In terms of our outcomes, we're comparable to all accredited schools in the USA and Canada. All our faculty is board certified in their specialty by the appropriate organization. All our basic scientists have PhDs from prestigious universities in the USA, Europe, and Latin America. And a significant number of our graduates go on to prestigious residency programs in the USA. This year, 98% matched on the either first match or the what's called the SOAP or scramble to fill up the residency program positions, both in the USA or Puerto Rico. We're the largest source of Hispanic physicians in the nation. We have 5 PhD programs in the biomedical sciences. Dr. Colon is an active collaborator in our anatomy and neurobiology program. We have 4 MD PhD, we call them concurrent, our local UPR medical sciences. We have 1 focused on cancer with MD Anderson Cancer Center at the University of Texas, Houston. We have 1 with Mayo Medical School, and the one that has us here today, the Yale UPR Cooperative MD PhD program. Next slide, please. In terms of research, we've always carried out world-class medical research. We're not as big as other institutions, but we have our renowned UPR Institute of Neurobiology. Again, Dr. Colon is a constant collaborator there, which we appreciate very much. Our Caribbean Primate Center is unique in the world, and it's now the focus of reconstruction because it was severely damaged by Hurricane Maria. Our faculty produces steady output of publications in many prestigious journals, and we're considered a research-intensive institution as we have close to $50 million for research funding and community research funding, mostly here at the med school. The next slide, please. And I pass it on to Yale. I know all of that because my wife and daughter are both Yaleys, but I'll let Tony take it on.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and give a little bit of introduction. So Yale University is one of the oldest universities in the US. It's considered part of the Ivy League system of colleges and universities. It was founded in 1701. And it's a relatively small university for the big reputation it has. Only 5,500 undergraduates, and actually more graduate students than undergrads. There are about 7,000 graduate students. It's a pretty, it's in a good situation financially. There's a 27 billion endowment, which means that there's a lot of resources at its disposal. A lot of PhDs graduate from Yale. In fact, it's the largest source of PhDs among all Ivy schools. And if you're interested in the history of Yale, you'll be able to find that 5 US presidents have graduated from the university, 60 Nobel Prizes, 17 Supreme Court justices, including Sonia Sotomayor. So a really prestigious and wonderful learning environment. In addition, something that you might not know is that there's a big tradition of Latino and Puerto Rican community, both within the university and at Yale. The university has La Casa Cultural Julia de Burgos, which is now La Casa Latina. It's a cultural center for students that are from Latino backgrounds or interested in connecting with Latino communities. We have a large population of students that self-identify as Puerto Ricans, and also faculty members and postdocs and staff. And there's a lot of activities both within the university and in the surrounding cities, which have a big population of Latino and Puerto Rican heritage that have to do with Puerto Rico. So it's a, there's a really big, rich tradition here at the university. And now I'm going to pass it off to Tony, who's going to talk about the Biological and Biomedical Sciences program, which provides the PhD portion of the joint program.
So hello, everyone. I want to talk about the BBS, which is an abbreviation for what we call our combined PhD programs in the biomedical and biological sciences. And that's a mouthful, so we just abbreviate it BBS. And it is really a platform that allows us to really give the utmost attention and high quality in terms of recruiting the very best students worldwide to Yale to do their PhDs, giving them uniform high quality training, and providing what I consider to be very generous funding, and we'll get into that in a minute, to support their training. And if I don't say it at the end, our goal here, our mission at Yale, is really to train students to become our peers and to become peers to us in as scientists and as physician scientists. So we have 350 faculty at Yale and about 500 students, and they are distributed throughout what are really 3 campuses. 2 of them are contiguous. So the School of Medicine closely abuts the main campus. And then about 7 years ago, Yale purchased a large former pharmaceutical company campus and established 5 cutting-edge research institutes that are the home to faculty and faculty trainers. And right now, probably about 50 of our students are doing their training out on West Campus. So next slide, please. So that might sound very, very big, but it's actually one of the biggest selling points to Yale, I think, is there is an intimacy to it. So the School of Medicine and main campus are a 15-minute walk apart. I actually can do it in about 7. I think it just depends on how quickly you want to get there. West Campus is connected by a shuttle, and it's very straightforward to get out there. The shuttles run very, very regularly. And what I will also say is Yale is big enough that there's somebody who's world class in every single discipline that you would want to work with. And I really mean that. The standard for initial appointment and for promotion at Yale to tenure is that you need to be a world leader in your field. And so, believe it or not, Daniel and I are world leaders in our field, and as are all the faculty. And yet we're small enough that we all know each other. I'm obviously sitting here with Daniel in his office, and I think this kind of smallness, we're not too big, and it really allows networking and collaboration like no other environment on the planet. Okay. Students and the faculty are actually organized into 8 different scientific homes, which are called tracks. And if I could just have the next slide, you can see that these tracks are entrance points to the BBS program. And so when you apply, you will apply based on your scientific interests to one of these 8 tracks. So you can see biochemistry, biophysics, and structural biology, which is actually undergoing a name change for the fall. So if you log in, you'll see that that's now a biochemistry, quantitative biology, structural biology, and biophysics. There's computational biology and bioinformatics, immunology, microbiology, molecular cell biology, genetics and development. There's molecular medicine, pharmacology and physiology, neuroscience. And then for about 3 years now, I think this is our 3rd year, we will offer a small but excellent training in plant molecular biology. If I could have the next slide. To enter our program, students have to apply, they apply to Yale as to a track, and they will spend their first year. That track really is an organizing principle for their first year. So their track will provide them, as I pointed out, really an intellectual concentration. So if you're interested in plants, you would apply to plant molecular biology. If you're interested in molecular medicine, you would apply to that track. You will have a director for advising. So usually your first year advising when you enter is done by a director, but it's actually done by a director in consultation with faculty and students. So you essentially will meet right at the beginning with a group of advisors, including peers who may be a year or 2 ahead of you, that will advise you on coursework, on possible faculty with whom you may want to rotate. And so that can be, and of course, I'm always here, Daniel is always here as resources as well. When you arrive, we will have a week of orientation to expose you to Yale and everything it has to offer, including numerous social events so that you can connect with your peers. Some of these people you will be friends with for the rest of your life. So it really is the beginning of something special. You will start in your first year with courses and, of course, laboratory rotations. And some of those laboratory rotations will actually, given the nature of the MD PhD program here, the laboratory rotations will actually be the first activity that you may engage in. And the other nice thing about the BBS is it gives you the freedom, if you arrive on campus and you are excited to possibly work in a lab that is not strictly within the boundaries of your track, please go ahead. You have every right to do that. We encourage that. And in many cases, students decide that that's what they want to pursue for their PhD. If I could have the next slide. Okay, so to access our application, and in fact, this website, bbs.yale.edu, has a myriad of information, which you can see by clicking on the radial buttons on the top. But specifically talking about the application, you will see a button on our entry point that says Apply to the BBS program. And if you click on that, it will link you to the actual Yale application. So it says Apply to the BBS program here, and that will bring you to the Yale Graduate School application. And you actually apply not directly to the BBS, but to the Yale Graduate School. And then they allow us access to those applications so that we can review them and decide on them. If I can have the next slide. If you click on that graduate school application, you'll be brought to a page here where you will have to create an account for yourself, and it requires some of your just basic information, but then also it'll require you to make a password and a personal, it will assign you a personal identification number. Now, completing the application, there are a number of items here, and I anticipate we can go through these in more detail. But you will see the sections there. There's a section on personal information and contact information and program of study. I'll have more to say about the program of study in a moment. You will have to write a personal statement, and that details your motivation for pursuing a PhD or in the biological and biomedical sciences at Yale. It will, there will be another essay discussing, a brief essay discussing your prior study. And then there will also be areas to enter your standardized test scores, English speaking test if it's relevant, and languages and other information. So if we can go on and onto the next slide, so there are there's a space under supplemental forms to enter your summary of science grades. So in the BBS, obviously we're probably more focused on how you did in your science grades than perhaps in your history class. So that has its own special section. And then there will be a section for recommendations. And usually people will submit at least 3. And these would be from people who know you well, have seen you, ideally have seen you in a situation where you've been pursuing science, or you've been pursuing some activity that might be relevant that you feel particularly passionate about. If I could have the next slide. So regarding the program of study, remember that this is a generic application for the Yale Graduate School. So you'll want to go in and click on the biological and biomedical sciences. So that's the entry point. That would include all of the 8 tracks. Okay, so select BBS there. Then you will put in 2 other pieces of information. So in step 3, where it says additional program information, you would put in your track of interest. Remember, there are 8 tracks. There's microbiology and neurobiology and plant molecular biology and molecular cellular developmental biology. So you're going to select from a pull-down menu your track of interest there. And then very important, we need to know as best as we can, we need you to identify yourself as an applicant to the UPR Cooperative MD PhD program, because that helps us find you early in the application process. And so we can be in communication with the UPR and with Dr. Gonzalez Mendez's application process as well, so that we can be in discussion about you as a candidate and your suitability for our program. Both of the programs act independently, but we do like to know, we do like to be in contact. You will also want to enter details about your prior study. This would include where you obtained your degree and what it was in, and ideally, if you could convert your GPA to a 4.0 scale. We will do that for you if you don't, but it's much easier for us if you do it. Okay, and then for the standardized test, you would enter here the MCAT scores in the other test section. And so you'll see it says example there as an MCAT, and you can upload your paper score report there as a document. Okay, so a completed application then will contain this application form, which is just that initial information form, a summary of your science grades, a resume, so you can attach a resume if you like as a supplemental file, a personal statement that describes your motivation for going to pursue a PhD in the BBS, 3 letters of recommendation, copies of your transcripts, and MCAT and TOEFL scores. And our application deadline is December 1st, 2018. Okay. In terms of admission timeline, we often begin considering applications very shortly after the due date. So usually within the first week of December, we are integrating all that information, and the individual tracks each have committees comprised of anywhere from 5 to 12 members who review the applications and decide whom to invite for interviews. If you're invited for an interview, usually you will be contacted by the end of the first week in January, and you'll be invited to Yale, to visit Yale in February for on-campus interviews. And usually those interviews take place we have you arrive on a Thursday, and usually the interviews are on Friday with more Yale-specific events on Saturday, and then you're free to leave on Sunday.
And they're paid for.
And they're paid for, yes, and generally quite fun. So in March, we will make admissions decisions, and we send those to the graduate school. So the graduate school ultimately has the right to admit you. We've never made a recommendation to them that they have not accepted, at least not to my knowledge, but it's a formality that they rely on. And then by April 15th is your deadline to accept our offer if you are admitted. Okay, if I could have the next slide. So if I were to point out some features of successful applicants, obviously we want you to have a strong academic record. We want to know that in your coursework here that you will thrive, and that's generally a very good predictor of that. It's very important to have independent research experience. You will be spending most of your time here at Yale doing your own independent research, either at the bench or in the dry lab and computation-based. And it's really important to us that you know what that is like to spend your time doing that. And so it's really absolutely imperative that you've had extensive independent research experience. You want to have strong letters of recommendation. Again, these are people ideally who know you well, have seen you in situations where you've been challenged and been successful, and can give us specific examples of that. I would not pick someone who does not know you well, or someone who you do not feel will take the time to actually write a thoughtful letter specifically about you. And then we're also looking in your personal statement for you to articulate goals. Why do you want to get a PhD? What is it about science that interests you? What are your long-term plans beyond graduate school and beyond getting an MD PhD degree? Okay, next slide. The great news is that funding, we fund all of our students. And so what that means is not only will you get full tuition and free health insurance here at Yale, but you get a $35,000, $850 stipend every year. And you can live quite well in New Haven on that dollar amount. And so it's the total package here is if you add everything up, is over $80,000 of support in terms of per year. And that's with no payback requirement.
So we pay you to study.
So we pay you to study. We pay you to be to work hard and study hard. Okay, next slide. So upon admission to the program, you'll spend year one at, is this my section? Yes, okay. So you spend year one at the medical school. You would come here after the first year summer to do lab rotations at Yale. In years 2 and 3, you will do your medical school at UPR, and then you will come here to do your PhD in years 4 through 7, and probably ideally joining one of the labs that you had rotated in 2 summers previously. Although in theory, you could perhaps fit in a quick rotation at the beginning of that period to find a lab that's appropriate. We can talk more about this at the end, but I believe it is also possible if you are already a first-year student at UPR, in your first year, you can apply to the PhD part of this program, and we can talk more about that in the Q&A. And then you'll return to UPR after your PhD is completed here to finish your clinical rotations. Can I have the next slide? So the BBS coursework here is you will take coursework in your first year. Often MD, PhD students with medical training are given some exemptions for the coursework, so they may not have to do the full number of courses depending on which track they enter. Most of them will give you some credit for the coursework you take as a medical student. You will have to pass your qualifying exam, and this is often focused either on an intense sort of reading of the literature that's relevant to your field, and or a proposal and defense of that proposal for what you might want to pursue as your research project. So it depends a little bit on which track you're in, the format for the qualifying exam. After you pass your qualifying exam, you will just engage in thesis research and trying to complete that. And then we also require that you teach 2 semesters here as a PhD student. And Yale is actually known now internationally as a center for excellence in scientific teaching. And we have an entire nationally renowned center called the Center for Teaching and Learning that has a variety of workshops and even intense coursework to help you become better at teaching science. Okay, next slide. We also have a variety of career development activities. Some of these are student-led, some of these are led in partnership with our Office of Career Development. We have research and progress talks that are integrated with the MD PhD program. We mandate that you are trained properly in responsible conduct of research. So this is everything from research ethics to there's even for the MD PhD programs issues relating to patient contact, which I'm sure you will also get as part of your MD training. The MD PhD program right now has 126 students, but a little over half of them, as you would expect, are in PhD training. Okay, next slide. As I pointed out, we have a Center for Teaching and Learning that's excellent for teaching you how to learn and lead and instruct. There are literally hundreds of seminars, journal clubs, and grand rounds. You could go to 5 of these a day if you chose to. So the difficulty is more in deciding what not to go to than what to attend. We also have tremendous resources for professional development, including a Biomedical Careers Council committee that runs our career fair every year, and we hold it in the largest auditorium on the medical school campus, and it's standing room only if you don't get there in time. And we bring in alumni from the program to talk about their careers. We have affinity groups such as the Women in Science at Yale, which is almost 20 years old, which is a top-down mentoring program where faculty mentor postdocs, who mentor graduate students, who mentor undergraduates, who mentor high school students. And so I have my own, I'm a mentor for WeSay, and I am a mentor to 5 really wonderful, talented postdoctoral women here at Yale who are really the next generation, I think, of leadership. There's a graduate consulting club for students who are interested possibly in pursuing management consulting as a career. We have the science diplomats who view it as our mission to explain to the populace, explain to people who are not scientists what science is, how it works, and to provide a scientific understanding of current sort of topics that you may read about in the newspaper. The Yale students run their own journal called the Yale Journal of Biology and Medicine. It's actually totally run by students, and it's PubMed listed. You can publish in here, and it will be an official publication on your CV. And many of the students who have worked with the journal have gone on to careers in publishing. Then we also have the Career Network for Student Scientists and Postdocs at Yale. And again, that brings in, it actually acts kind of as a platform both for networking and for hiring of students. And they're very well connected with the biotech and farm communities, both here in New Haven and in Boston and New York. So if I get the next slide. So the other thing that is really unique, I think, about Yale is we have a tremendous number of affinity groups to support people who might have a shared background. So we'll talk about the Yale Minority Scientist Research Network in a minute. That's really BBS based. Our program, the BBS, was instrumental in starting out a local chapter of OUT in STEM, and this is for an affinity group for supporter people who are from the LGBTQ community or supporters thereof, and it's one of the more vibrant student groups on campus. And in fact, they started a wonderful campaign that was aimed at calling attention to inclusiveness here on campus. Giovanna will talk about Ciencia Puerto Rico in a second. We say, I think I pointed out, we also talked about La Casa Latina. Yale, the BBS students, again, just started a chapter of SACNAS here at Yale. Some of you may be familiar with SACNAS, may go to the national meeting. And then I think the thing that really historically puts us on the map, so some of you may be familiar with an organization called the Boucher Honor Society, and it's one of the oldest and most prestigious honor societies for scientists from underrepresented groups. So Edward Boucher is actually a native of New Haven here and went to high school here, was the valedictorian of his high school class, and he was the first African-American to get a PhD in physics in America. And he got that here at Yale, and I think he was only 23 or 24 years old, and went on to a really illustrious career as an educator. And so we're proud to have that name. There are Boucher chapters now at other schools, but the first one was here, and the original Boucher was here at Yale. We're very proud of that. You will see his portrait prominently featured in the Hall of Graduate Studies. Okay, next slide. Okay, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll say very briefly about the Yale Minority Scientist Research Network. That is essentially a community of scientists, either fully trained scientists or scientists in training. You can see the picture there, that show me picture taken in Lighthouse Park here, close to the Long Island Sound. And it's essentially a community of scientists that discusses issues that have to do with science in general, with Yale, and also with being a minority scientist. And the only thing that I'll emphasize about that is that there's a community of people from diverse backgrounds. We really value diversity in science here at Yale, particularly because we want to make sure that the scientific enterprise is open to everyone. It's a very so it's an environment that values free thinking and scholarship, and it has the communities to be able to facilitate that. Next slide.
Yeah, so I'm going to finish up and we're going to wrap up pretty soon. I just wanted to give a brief overview of the Yale Ciencia initiative, which is something really special that Yale has established here. It's a collaboration between the university and Ciencia Puerto Rico, which is a network of thousands of scientists that have some ties or affiliation to Puerto Rico. And at the university, we leverage this community to increase exposure and participation in science, both nationally and also within the programs of the university. So there's a big emphasis of doing outreach and letting students in Puerto Rico and across the US know about the great training opportunities that are at the university. I lead the Yale Ciencia Initiative, and one of the programs that I'm most proud of is called the Yale Ciencia Academy, and it's an NIH-funded program that provides professional development, training, and also a peer and mentoring community for students that are mostly from underrepresented backgrounds or that want to connect with mentors from those backgrounds. And it's a national program. So whether you end up at Yale or not, or in another graduate training program, feel free to consider applying to this to complement your research and graduate training with other skills and other mentors. So we know there's a number of you that might not be graduating next year. So if you still have a couple of years left, you should also consider applying to some of these other programs. Yale has a number of summer research training opportunities. They're all very good. They have slightly different emphasis. The biomedical SURF program is open to early stage undergraduates. So if you're first or second year You should look at that one and apply to that. We also have a regular summer undergraduate research fellowship program that you can apply to if you're a little bit of a later stage. And there's also programs that are focused on chemistry. The CRISP RU and the Sackler NSF are more in the chemistry, physical sciences side of research. Finally, there's also a post-bac research program. So if you are graduating this year, but you're not sure if you want to apply to a graduate training program or an MD PhD program next year, consider this one because it'll give you a really good opportunity to focus and get more research training and experience before you actually apply to a training program. All the deadlines for these programs are February 1st, and we'll share the slides with the links so you can find more information about them. All right, so I think that ends the presentation we had. We've had a number of Q&As, questions coming on the chat, and I wanted to bring a couple of them to the panelists so that we can, they can also provide more details. In particular, we have a number of questions about the need to take the GRE or the MCAT for applying to this program. Tony, do you want to, or Daniela or Ricardo, do you want to handle that one?
I can do it. So I don't think it's essential to take the GRE. If you've taken it and you want to submit the score, we would certainly consider it, but it's not a mandate of this program.
Yes, the GRE is only required if you're only applying to the PhD portion, right?
Right, and I would say the advanced GRE we do not require. So you know the specific the discipline specific tests we don't require. So even for our PhD students, we don't require it.
Okay, good. So MCATs are the only requirement for the MD PhD program. But if you have taken the GRE or if you're thinking of considering just the PhD program, then submit GRE scores as well. We also have a number of questions about the importance of research for the application, and also if you have to have had research in biology as opposed to you know, something like inorganic chemistry somebody asked about.
Yeah, so I can comment on that. I feel any laboratory experience, I think essentially we want to know that you have you've worked in a lab, that you understand what it's like to be in the lab for long periods of time. You understand that not every single experiment that you do works perfectly every time, and so I think that
unless you're dying.
Yeah, no. So I think chemistry would be highly relevant. In fact, you could very well be in a chemistry lab here in our biochemistry program, doing work that might even be relevant to the experiences you've had. So
I would just say, as a way of an anecdote, my first 3 PhD students that are now postdocs and doing very well, the 3 of them had previous research experience in plants. And my lab works in neuroscience. I haven't had a single student come into my lab that, upon entering through the door, had worked on the systems, the microscopes,
right,
or the organisms that we use.
Right.
So, but all of them have had some sort of research experience, in that we're not looking for you to be an expert in a machine or a technique. We just want you to know what you're getting into. Meaning, having had enough experience that you know that this is what you want to do. That's essentially not the specific project that you're going to be working on for your thesis, but the general idea of getting a PhD. That's something that you want to do it because you have experienced part of it.
By that same token, somebody asked, are applicants required to have a research proposal in mind when applying?
No.
No. If you walk in with a research proposal, guaranteed that somebody might be impressed. Particularly, like what you want to do is, if you interview with somebody, if you're invited for an interview, you want to take a look at what they work on. And if you have ideas about the research, share them, because people want to hear ideas and they want to know that you're thinking about it.
Right.
But you don't have to submit a proposal. Certainly not as part of your application. Please don't, because the application is very specific on what you need to put in there. And certainly not when you come for the interviews. Just if you interview with somebody at that point, it's good to know a little bit of what they work on.
But I think this highlights a point that I didn't really expressly say, that in anticipation of writing your personal statement, you may want to go onto our BBS website and research some of the research that different faculty are engaged in, and comment specifically in your personal statement about, I might want to work with, Daniel Colon Ramos and his work on, synaptic development. And so it sends a signal to us that you have put some thought into what we have to offer here and what you might want to do. So I actually think that is pretty important. At least when I've served on admissions committees, I've always liked to see someone who had given some specific thought to what they might want to do, given the strengths of the faculty here at Yale.
Great. We also have a number of questions about, what are common GPA, MCAT scores? What do you put more stress in an application? Can one of you comment on what you look for in an application and if there's ranges of scores that you need?
Yeah, I'll start by saying something very broad, and I'll let Ricardo comment from the UPR side on the MCAT scores in particular. At Yale, we're interested in looking at the candidate, like what's called holistically, meaning all of the aspects of the candidate, looking in the context of the recommendation letter, the research experience. So there are no explicit numbers that we set. Like, we cannot tell you, like, if you have a GPA below this, don't bother. It doesn't work that way. Of course, the program is very competitive, so the students are competing with each other. So we tend to get very good applicants that have done very well. But we're looking at the whole individual. We're looking at the whole individual in terms of what they have done and what they want to do in the personal statement.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, I was a director of admissions for the biochemistry track for 15 years. And at one point, Yale, this goes back 15 or 20 years ago, would like us to rate, based on, they wanted us to rank the students in addition to admitting them. And there's no real way to rank students based on anything other than numbers, right? So you could rank them on their GPA or on their GRE scores. Well, I had 15 years of data, and when I went back and looked at that, you could never predict who would be the most successful students based on that rank list. So most people who are familiar with this look at the whole package, and we don't look at specific numbers, because it's really the level of engagement and how hard you work to become a scientist and to address questions in the lab that really dictates, I think, how successful you are ultimately here.
Ricardo, do you want to comment on the MCATs?
Yeah, this is, again, as Tony mentions and Daniel, we look at the whole package, but we get a very large number of applications, not as big as, say, Yale, but we still got, last year we got 9 applications for every position that we can take in the medical school. So we have to rank them. So we take about between 100 and 110 students every year, typically 105, but we can go a little lower or higher depending on the quality of the applicants. We need to rank them. And for that, we're going to use the GPA, we're going to use the MCAT, and we are going to use the letters of recommendation. So it's important, as Tony said, that those letters come in because we want to look at the whole package. That said, and I think I put this in one of the Q&A, it's important that you understand, as Daniel said, they're very competitive programs. For last year's class, the average GPA, general GPA at UPR Med was somewhere around 375. We also look at the GPA in sciences. That was specifically an average around 370. And the MCATs on average slightly exceeded the USA national average. So do we have a minimum? Only that state law requires, which is a very low 2.0 GPA. No, I do not recommend you apply to med school in Puerto Rico, UPR Med with 2.0. But so as you can see, it's very competitive. We want to look at the whole package. After the interview, we evaluate the whole package and re-rank. And the MCAT is important for us because it's really the only consistent predictor we have, unfortunately, of performance on USMLE exams. And that is not only in Puerto Rico, that's all throughout the literature on medical education. And we need for you to be able to get a USA license. So you must be able to pass those exams. And that's the important for us of the MCAT. We can have a long debate, but not today.
Great, thank you. Someone is asking, I think this refers to if you're already in an MD program and you want to apply to the MD PhD joint program for, say, a PhD in biomedical engineering, would they need to take the GRE? Or can they just submit their MCAT scores?
Sorry, are they at UPR?
I think so.
Okay. Well, we would need their MCAT score. I think that, so what I will say is that biomedical engineering at Yale is not part of the BBS. So we could probably try to consider it as a one-off, but it wouldn't be a standard sort of path. If they were applying with the intention of working for some of the faculty in biomedical engineering are part of the BBS program. Those that tend to be sort of more focused on therapeutic development or microbiology or biological systems tend to be a little closer. I mean, the people doing robotics and prostheses and things like that are not part of the BBS. So I think it would have to do very specifically with the student's interests. We could consider it. It is not the main sort of focus.
Yeah, so the tracks in BBS, there have been a few questions about this. So this is a cooperative program between the BBS, which are the 8 tracks that Tony mentioned, and the University of Puerto Rico Medical School. So if it's not the University of Puerto Rico Medical School and if it's not the BBS, then it's not part of the cooperative program. There's a possibility that we could talk to the engineering program and ask them, but the more natural way of doing it with what exists right now will be to select a faculty that's part of those tracks. There are faculty, as Tony was mentioning, that do engineering and are part of the 8 tracks that we're talking about, but then it wouldn't be through the engineering program.
Okay, great. There's also some questions about whether the TOEFL is a requirement for applying to this program.
So I think it depends on whether you would consider English as a first or second language. If it's a second language, I think the TOEFL is a requirement. And that is not our requirement, that is the graduate school's requirement. And remember, part of this concern here is the ability to teach in English. All of our courses are in English. And so, I can't think of a specific case where a specific TOEFL score has been a deal breaker in terms of, we've been interested in a student and they get a TOEFL score and the graduate school says, no, that's not acceptable. In cases where students come in and their TOEFL score is under, let's say 100, usually we require that they demonstrate proficiency officially somehow. So they either will take an intense English speaking course or they will go through some prescribed activity mandated by the graduate school. And so, I had a student in my lab that just went, who's from China and just went through this process. And she basically just had to prove that she could teach a course in English, and she did a great job. So that's where that requirement comes from.
Yeah, take a look at the requirements for the Yale Graduate School. There might be further instructions there to help you figure out if you need to take the TOEFL or not. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We'll leave the session open to answer by text some of the questions that have come in, but I wanted to give our panelists some last words if you want to close out the session, maybe last words of advice or things that you want to particularly highlight.
Yes, I would just mention that, I mean, for those there were some questions here about scores and also about research experiences. And I will say, look, in terms of the research experience, recognize that you're going to be spending a significant amount of your career in first training and then doing research. So you want enough experience to know that that's what you want to do. This is like if you want to go to the beach and you've never been, but you're spending like 2 weeks there. You know, you wanna have an idea of what you're getting into. So there's no set amount of, like, there's no requirement like you must have spent this many hours doing research. But a good rule of thumb is that is there somebody that can write you a recommendation letter, a meaningful recommendation letter based on your research experience? If you cannot think of a person that can do that, then you need more research experience.
Right.
And a good way of getting more research experience is by doing something like a postbac. A postbac is a year that you take after graduation that allows you to do some research and get your feet wet and see if this is really for you. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that I will say in terms of the scores and everything else is you can, we'll try to answer some of these questions, but I recommend these students not to dismiss themselves. Give yourself the opportunity to apply to these programs and then let other people make the decision if you're competitive or not. Don't worry too much about how many other people are applying or things that you cannot control. You did your best with your GPA and your MCATs and your standardized test. Take the TOEFL if you feel that you need to have more exams there that show that you're fluent in English, and then send in the application.
Yeah, I would say the same. I feel that we take a very broad view of what we're looking for in students. And the other thing I will say is that if any of you are going to SACNAS or ABRACAMS or the NIH Career Fair this year, please look for one of us at those meetings and come talk to us, because I think any questions you have, any advice that you could see. And also don't hesitate to reach out to either me or to Dr. Kazmierczak here as part of this. I would say that probably for BBS related questions, I would be the better and more appropriate contact. But I think either one of us would have be able to answer your questions.
I will echo the words of Danielle and Tony on this. I think I will reemphasize something that Tony mentioned. Make sure your letters of recommendations are from people who know you, and the letters should be specific, particularly if it's a person you did research with, that the letter talks about your research with that person. It doesn't really matter whether you have poster presentations or papers. Those are all good, but never sell yourself short on it. But it's really key that you do not get generic letters of recommendation, because we're going to get some very specific, strong letters that do add up when we look at the overall picture. In general, again, it's make sure you put your best foot forward, but you have what you have. And you know, I have seen people with really great GPAs and not so good MCATs. I have seen people with very average everything and good research experience. They've all come in, they've all made good doctors. So, as we start building up our experience with the MD PhD programs down here, it is surprising how people turn out and how creative they can be. They never cease to surprise us as professors. So please do apply.
Okay, great. Thank you all. I left our contact information there. Feel free to reach out via email if you have additional questions. We'll also be posting this video on Facebook, the Ciencia Puerto Rico Facebook page, our website, and sending out slides via email. Thank you, everybody, for participating, and have a great day.